What if some of the oldest stories in Kentucky were never meant to be written down? What if they were built into ridgelines, carved into stone, hidden in caves, and then quietly abandoned without explanation? Across Kentucky's hills and river valleys are structures and markings that do not fit neatly into the historical frameworks we rely on. Stone walls that look deliberate but fail as fortifications. Rock carvings that mix familiar symbols with shapes no one can confidently identify. Entire communities shaped from earth that were not destroyed by war but simply left behind. And deep underground, traces of people who carried fire into darkness where a single mistake could mean death. These are not legends passed down through myth. They are physical remains, measurable, mapped, and studied, yet still unresolved. Archaeology offers partial answers, but never a complete one. Context is missing. Records are silent. Meanings have eroded faster than the stone itself. This video does not claim lost civilizations or forbidden knowledge. Instead, it examines 10 real sites in Kentucky where evidence survives, but certainty does not. Together, they reveal a quieter truth. History is not wrong, it is incomplete. When people think of ancient mysteries, they often imagine distant deserts, massive stone temples, or civilizations far removed from modern life. Kentucky rarely enters that picture. It is seen as a landscape shaped by rivers, forests, and frontier history. Yet long before state lines, towns, or written records existed, this land was already being measured, marked, and altered with intention. Archaeology confirms that Kentucky has been continuously occupied for thousands of years. Different cultures lived here across long stretches of time: archaic groups, woodland societies, and later Mississippian communities. They hunted, gathered, traded, buried their dead, carved symbols, and reshaped the land itself. Much of this is well documented, but scattered across the state are sites that resist simple explanation. Not because they are fake or exaggerated, but because they do not align cleanly with what we expect these cultures to have built or how we expect them to behave. Some structures appear purposeful yet impractical. Some symbols feel deliberate yet unreadable. Some settlements show planning and organization, yet no clear reason for their abandonment. In caves, mountains, riverbanks, and quiet fields, physical evidence survives while the stories behind it do not. Archaeologists can measure stones, date charcoal, and analyze soil layers, but meaning does not fossilize easily. What makes these sites compelling is not scale or spectacle. None of them are massive pyramids or towering monuments. Their power comes from subtlety. A low stone wall placed at the exact point where a ridge narrows. A panel of carvings that mixed styles in ways that defy categorization. A ceremonial layout traced into earth rather than built upward. Marks left deep underground where no one would casually wander. Over time, erosion, collapse, early excavations, and simple neglect removed crucial context. In some cases, the site itself partially vanished. In others, artifacts remained, but the cultural logic that once explained them did not. This creates a gap, one that invites speculation but also demands restraint. This video examines 10 such sites across Kentucky. Each one is real, each has been studied. None require extraordinary explanations to be intriguing. Instead, they reveal something quieter and more challenging: the limits of reconstruction. Together, they show how history is assembled from fragments and how easily intention can outlast understanding. What follows is not an attempt to solve these mysteries, but to examine them carefully, one by one, and ask why they continue to resist closure. 1. Indian Fort Mountain. Stone walls with no clear purpose. Indian Fort Mountain rises quietly above the town of Berea. At first glance, it looks like any other wooded ridge in eastern Kentucky. But once you begin walking the trails along its spine, something feels different. The land narrows, bends, and funnels movement in ways that seem too deliberate to be accidental. Along these ridgelines are low, dry stone walls, scattered and broken by time. They are not tall, they are not thick, and they are not built with mortar. Some stones are small enough to carry easily, others heavy enough to require careful placement. Whoever stacked them understood balance, weight, and uneven ground. The problem is this: these walls do not function well as fortifications. They are too low to stop an attack, too thin to withstand force, too inconsistent to form a continuous defensive perimeter. And yet, they are clearly intentional. When archaeologists mapped the layout, another pattern emerged. The walls often appear at natural choke points, places where the ridge narrows, where movement is naturally guided. In other areas, they sit near steep drop-offs overlooking the valleys below, locations that offer visibility rather than protection. This suggests awareness of terrain, but not in the way traditional military forts are designed. Some researchers have suggested a woodland-era origin. That explanation fits the region chronologically, but the design does not match known woodland fort sites. There are no clear gates, no reinforced sections, no thick ramparts. The walls seem less concerned with keeping people out and more focused on directing where people go. This raises a more unsettling question. If these walls were not meant to defend, what were they meant to define? Adding to the mystery are reports of rock outcrops and wall alignments that appear to correspond with sunrise or sunset at certain times of the year. Hikers have noted moments when light moves cleanly across specific points on the ridge during solstices or equinoxes. These alignments are not proven with certainty, but they are consistent enough to be difficult to dismiss entirely. There are also small mound-like rises along the ridge. They are not large enough to be burial mounds, yet they do not look entirely natural. Erosion may have altered older earthworks, or these could be remnants of platforms, gathering spots, or symbolic markers. What makes Indian Fort Mountain compelling is not mystery built on absence. The stones are still there. The layout can still be followed. The intention feels present. What is missing is the explanation. The mountain does not tell a story of chaos. It tells a story of order whose meaning no longer translates. And that may be the most important clue of all. 2. Redbird River Area. Lost Redbird Petroglyph Panels. The vanished carved stone panel. At one time, along the rocky cliffs near the Redbird River, there was a stone panel that drew quiet attention from those who managed to find it. It was not marked by signs or protected by barriers. It simply existed, embedded in the landscape, covered in carvings that did not fully resemble anything else in the region. People who saw the panel described figures of birds, human shapes, spirals, and unfamiliar symbols carved into a broad rock face. Some markings were shallow and precise, as if carefully scratched. Others were cut deeper, with force and intention. What made the panel unsettling was not just its age, but its mixture of styles. Certain figures looked consistent with known indigenous petroglyph traditions. Right beside them, however, were shapes that did not fit comfortably into any established catalog. A few of these symbols appeared almost alphabetic, lines and forms that reminded some observers of early writing systems from far beyond North America. That resemblance was enough to spark debate. Were these simply misinterpreted native symbols? Coincidence shaped by the human tendency to see patterns? Or evidence of influences that no longer have a clear historical explanation? Before those questions could be examined carefully, the site changed forever. A major rock collapse caused the panel to fracture. Large portions broke away. Some fragments were reportedly moved, stored, or misplaced. Others may have been lost entirely. Today, the original panel no longer exists in its original form. What remains are partial fragments, old photographs, written descriptions, and conflicting memories from those who saw it before the collapse. That loss is critical. Petroglyphs rely on context. Placement, orientation, surrounding symbols, and relationship to the landscape all matter. Once the panel broke apart, that context was destroyed. Without it, interpretation becomes speculation. One carving in particular, a figure often described as a bird with outstretched wings, became central to the mystery. Its proportions and form did not match common regional motifs. Another debated element was a sequence of linear symbols that some believed resembled letters. No definitive proof supports ancient transoceanic contact. At the same time, there is no clear explanation for why these symbols differ so sharply from nearby examples. Today, the forest near the Redbird River is quiet. There is no dramatic marker indicating what was once there. Most people pass through the area unaware that an important piece of Kentucky's ancient record once overlooked the valley from a stone wall. The lost red bird petroglyph panels matter not because they provide answers, but because they demonstrate how easily meaning can vanish. A story carved in stone endured for centuries, only to be lost before modern tools could fully understand it. What remains is a reminder: when context collapses, certainty collapses with it. 3. Wycliffe Mounds, an earthen city abandoned without violence. Wycliffe Mound sits on a gentle rise above the Mississippi River floodplain. At first glance, the site appears quiet and unremarkable. Low earthen hills, open ground, and a landscape that blends easily into its surroundings. Nothing about it feels dramatic. And yet, beneath that calm surface lies evidence of a community that was carefully planned, socially complex, and deeply connected to ritual life. Archaeological research identifies Wycliffe as a Mississippian settlement occupied centuries before European contact. The mounds were not random piles of soil. They were deliberately shaped and arranged. One served as a platform mound, likely used by leaders or for public ceremonies. Others appear connected to gatherings, important structures, or communal functions. Together, they form a layout that resembles a small ceremonial city, built not with stone or timber walls, but by raising the earth itself. Standing at the center of the site, the ground subtly dips outward, creating a natural plaza. This open space may have hosted festivals, rituals, or communal events. The arrangement suggests coordination and shared purpose. Life here was organized, not improvised. What deepens the mystery is not the existence of the mounds, but what happened next. There is no clear evidence of warfare, no burn layers, no signs of sudden destruction. The village does not appear to have been overrun or violently erased. Instead, archaeological evidence points toward a gradual abandonment. People left in stages. Structures were no longer rebuilt. Activity slowed, then stopped. Why? Some researchers suggest environmental factors. Changes in river patterns or flooding may have made long-term settlement difficult. Others point to social or political shifts, changes in leadership, trade networks, or alliances that made the site less central. There is also the quieter possibility that the community's ceremonial focus moved elsewhere, taking its people with it. Inside the mounds, excavations uncovered pottery with unusual designs, tools, ceremonial objects, and burials that hint at a rich symbolic world. Some patterns suggest long-distance connections through trade. Others imply rituals involving music, offerings, or seasonal gatherings. But early excavations in the 20th century damaged parts of the site, permanently removing layers of information that could have clarified these practices. Today, Wycliffe Mounds feels peaceful. Visitors walk paths between the earthen rises. Children learn history nearby. The site is preserved, but incomplete. Wycliffe's mystery is not built on shock or spectacle. It is built on absence. A society with structure, belief, and intention shaped this land, and then left without telling us why. That silence is the puzzle the mounds still hold. 4. Livingston County Rock Art Shelters, carvings meant to be seen by few. In a quiet part of western Kentucky, sandstone overhangs form shallow shelters that are easy to overlook. They do not rise above the land or announce their presence. They hide along wooded slopes, shaped by water and time rather than human hands. And yet, within these natural shelters are marks that transform ordinary rock into something far more deliberate. When light adjusts under the overhangs, carved symbols emerge. Some are simple, straight lines, crosses, or small geometric shapes. Others are more complex, human-like figures with outstretched arms, animal forms, circles, and spirals carved deep into the soft stone. What immediately stands out is the lack of a single style. The carvings do not belong to one moment or one hand. Some figures are sharply defined, suggesting they were carved later. Others are worn down, their edges softened almost to invisibility. This indicates that the shelters were used across multiple generations and possibly by different cultural groups. Instead of a single message, the walls appear to hold layers of meaning, added slowly over time. Unlike large ceremonial centers or village sites, these shelters are not located near major settlements. There are no nearby mound complexes, no clear evidence of sustained occupation. That isolation makes the carvings more puzzling. Whoever created them chose a place that was private, shaded, and quiet. This raises an important question. If these symbols were meant to communicate power or status, why hide them? One explanation is that the shelters serve personal or small group purposes. They may have been places for recording visions, marking journeys, honoring spirits, or leaving signs meant only for those who already understood their meaning. The carvings feel less like public declarations and more like personal records, etched into stone where only careful eyes would notice. The atmosphere inside the shelters reinforces this idea. Sound behaves differently. Voices do not echo. They are absorbed by the rock. The temperature drops slightly. The outside world feels distant. Many visitors describe an instinctive urge to lower their voices, even when standing alone. The environment encourages reflection rather than performance. One particularly debated carving shows a human figure holding an object above its head. Interpretations vary widely. Some see a tool or weapon. Others suggest a basket, a symbol of the sun, or an offering. Without context, every explanation remains plausible and unprovable. Time is actively erasing these marks. The same soft stone that made carving easy also makes preservation difficult. Rain, freezing temperatures, and biological growth slowly wear away the details. Each year, the symbols grow fainter. The Livingston County rock art shelters do not overwhelm with scale or mystery. They do something quieter. They remind us that not all ancient expressions were meant to endure, and not all messages were meant for us. What remains is not a clear story, but the trace of human presence, left where silence itself became part of the meaning. 5. Mammoth Cave: Why People Carried Fire into the Deepest Dark. Mammoth Cave is the longest known cave system in the world, stretching for hundreds of miles beneath Kentucky's surface. Its scale alone is extraordinary. But the true mystery is not the cave itself. It is the people who chose to enter it, long before modern lighting, maps, or safety equipment existed. Deep inside the cave, archaeologists have found unmistakable traces of prehistoric human activity. Reed torches, burned at one end. Woven sandals, designed for traction on slick cave floors. Baskets, wooden poles, and fragments of tools. These are not accidental intrusions. They are evidence of repeated, deliberate journeys into total darkness. Some of these artifacts are located far from natural entrances, in passages that require careful navigation even today. Reaching them would have meant moving through narrow corridors, sudden drops, and unstable surfaces, guided only by flickering firelight. A single mistake could extinguish a torch and leave a person trapped in darkness with no way out. In at least one case, the danger became fatal. Human remains found deep within the cave suggest that someone entered and never returned. There is no sign of violence, no indication of panic, just the quiet end of a journey that went too far. The question is not whether people entered Mammoth Cave. They clearly did. The question is why. One explanation is resource extraction. Certain cave minerals, such as gypsum, were valuable for ritual or practical purposes. Marks left on cave walls indicate scraping and collection. This suggests knowledge passed down over generations, routes learned, hazards remembered. But this explanation does not fully account for the depth and risk involved. Another possibility is ceremonial use. In many cultures, caves are associated with the underworld, with transformation, death, or rebirth. Entering the earth itself can be a symbolic act. The darkness, silence, and isolation of Mammoth Cave would have made it a powerful setting for ritual experiences. There is also the simplest and most unsettling possibility. People went in because they believed they needed to. Not for survival, not for spectacle, but because the cave held meaning that justified the danger. Mammoth Cave does not preserve stories or symbols that explain these journeys. It preserves paths, tools, and footprints, evidence of intention without explanation. The fire is gone, the voices are gone, but the choice to enter the darkness remains visible. And that choice continues to challenge how we understand the relationship between ancient people and the landscapes they inhabited. 6. Mammoth cave markings, signs without a language. Beyond the tools and footprints left inside Mammoth Cave, there is another layer of evidence that deepens the mystery even further. Along certain passage walls and ceilings are marks made by fire and human hands, charcoal smears, torch streaks, and deliberate lines that do not appear to be random contact with the rock. Some of these marks are clearly functional. Soot patterns trace where torches were raised to light the way. Handprints and smudges show where people steadied themselves while moving through narrow passages. But mixed among these practical traces are symbols that do not serve an obvious purpose. Short lines etched or drawn in charcoal, repeated strokes clustered in specific areas, shapes that appear placed rather than accidental. In some sections, marks seem to cluster at decision points, junctions where a traveler would need to choose a direction. In others, they appear in areas where movement slows, almost as if the cave itself required acknowledgement before continuing. This raises an unsettling question. Were these marks meant to guide, to warn, or to signify something unseen? If they were navigational, their logic is no longer readable. Modern explorers cannot reliably follow them as a map. If they were symbolic, their meaning did not survive the culture that created them. Either way, what remains is a message without a key. Dating these markings is extremely difficult. A single cave wall may carry layers of soot and charcoal from different centuries. Later visitors could have unintentionally obscured earlier symbols. Context collapses in darkness, where space compresses and time overlaps. What makes these markings especially powerful is their location. These were not created where people lived or gathered. They were made far from daylight, in places that required commitment, planning, and risk just to reach. No one wanders into these chambers by accident. That alone suggests intention. Yet intention does not guarantee clarity. The markings show that ancient people did more than pass through the cave. They interacted with it, responded to it, and left traces that went beyond survival. But without the language, stories, or traditions that once explained them, those traces now resist interpretation. This is the paradox of Mammoth Cave. The deeper the evidence goes, the less certain the meaning becomes. The signs are still there, the message is not. And in that gap between mark and meaning, the cave preserves one of Kentucky's most enduring mysteries. 7. Big Bone Lick, a landscape filled with bones from another world. In northern Kentucky, near a quiet bend in the Ohio River, lies a place that once challenged how people understood the natural world. Long before modern paleontology existed, the ground at Big Bone Lick revealed massive bones unlike anything living nearby. They emerged from the soil in clusters, huge ribs, towering leg bones, and enormous skull fragments scattered across a muddy landscape. For early settlers and explorers, these remains were deeply unsettling. No animal they knew could have produced them. Some believed they belonged to giant buffalo. Others imagined unknown beasts from a forgotten age. Indigenous oral traditions already recognized the site as unusual, long before European arrival. Today, science offers a partial explanation. Big Bone Lick sits atop natural salt springs. For thousands of years, large prehistoric animals, mastodons, and other megafauna were drawn to the area to obtain minerals. The surrounding mud and unstable ground likely trapped weakened animals, turning the site into a slow, natural accumulation point for bones. But this explanation does not remove the mystery. It reframes it. Why were so many animals drawn here over such long periods? Why did their remains accumulate in such density rather than dispersing naturally? And how did humans, who lived nearby long after these animals vanished, interpret a landscape filled with the bones of creatures they had never seen alive? Big Bone Lick represents a collision between deep time and human memory. When people encountered these remains, they were facing evidence of a world that no longer existed. Without a scientific framework, the bones became symbols, proof that the land once held beings beyond contemporary understanding. Even after mastodons disappeared, the site retained its significance. Humans continued to visit it. The salt licks remained valuable. the bones remained visible. The land carried a story written not by people, but by extinction. Unlike carved stone or built structures, these remains were not intentional messages, yet they had an impact just as strong. They forced observers to confront the idea that the world changes, that entire forms of life can vanish, leaving only fragments behind. Big Bone Lick is not a mystery because science failed to explain it. It is a mystery because it reminds us that human history sits on top of much older stories, and sometimes those stories surface in ways that disrupt certainty. The bones did not belong to legends, but for a long time, legend was the only language available to describe them. 8. Indian Knoll, a 5,000-year-old cemetery that suggests early social order. Along the Green River lies Indian Knoll, one of the most significant archaic period sites in North America. At first, it appears to be a low rise of earth, shaped gradually over time. But beneath its surface, archaeologists uncovered thousands of burials, layered across centuries, far more than expected for societies traditionally described as small, mobile, and socially equal. Indian Knoll dates back more than 5,000 years, long before large agricultural villages or permanent cities emerged in the region. For a long time, such early communities were assumed to be relatively egalitarian, with little evidence of formal hierarchy. Indian Knoll complicates that assumption. The burials are not uniform. Some individuals were buried with numerous grave goods, tools, ornaments, and carefully placed objects. Others were interred with far fewer items. The placement of bodies, the repetition of burial patterns, and the clustering of certain individuals suggest that status, role, or identity mattered, even at this early stage of human organization. This raises difficult questions. What determines status in a society without written laws, kings, or cities? Was it age, skill, spiritual authority, lineage, or control over resources like river access and trade? The site's location offers one clue. The Green River was a vital corridor for movement, food, and exchange. Control over such a space could create influence without formal political structures. Indian Knoll may have functioned not only as a burial ground but as a symbolic center, anchoring social memory across generations. What makes the mystery deeper is scale. The sheer number of burials suggests long-term continuity. People return to this place again and again, choosing it deliberately to mark death and remembrance. This was not a temporary camp, it was a place of meaning. Yet, like many early excavations, parts of Indian Knoll were disturbed before modern archaeological standards existed. Context was lost. Some patterns can no longer be reconstructed with certainty. The data survives, but imperfectly. Indian Knoll does not offer dramatic architecture or carved symbols. Its message is quieter. It suggests that social complexity began earlier than we often assume, and that hierarchy, memory, and identity were already shaping human communities thousands of years before written history. The mystery is not whether Indian Knoll mattered. The mystery is how much of that early social world we can no longer see. 9. Bourbon County, ceremonial earthworks, a circle drawn into the earth. In Bourbon County, traces of an ancient earthen circle remain faintly visible in the landscape. There are no standing stones, no walls rising above the ground. Instead, the shape is defined by subtle changes in elevation, soil raised and shaped into a form that only becomes clear when viewed as a whole. Archaeologists associate the site with the early woodland period, a time marked by increasing ceremonial activity and regional interaction. Circular earthworks from this era appear elsewhere in North America, often interpreted as places for gathering, ritual, and social coordination. What makes this site difficult to interpret is not its form, but the absence of context. There are no written records, no clear oral traditions tied directly to the circle, no definitive evidence of how often it was used or by whom. The circle's geometry suggests intention. Creating a near-symmetrical form in Earth requires planning, labor, and shared understanding. This was not a casual construction. It implies agreement on where to build, how to shape the land, and what the space was meant to represent. One possibility is seasonal use. Some researchers propose that the circle functioned as a calendar space, tied loosely to solar movement or seasonal gatherings. Others suggest it served as a neutral ground where different groups could meet, trade, or participate in ceremonies without crossing territorial boundaries. The circular form itself may have carried symbolic meaning, unity, cycles, or continuity. Yet none of these interpretations can be confirmed. What remains is the outline of a space that once mattered enough for people to reshape the land, but not enough, apparently, to preserve its meaning through time. The earthwork does not dominate the landscape, it blends into it, becoming harder to see with each passing generation. That quiet disappearance is part of the mystery. The Bourbon County Circle challenges the assumption that important places must be monumental. Sometimes significance is expressed not through height or permanence, but through shared participation, a place defined by people gathering within it rather than by what they left behind. The circle survives as a question pressed into the soil. Its boundaries are visible, its purpose is not. And that tension between clear design and missing explanation places it firmly among Kentucky's unresolved ancient mysteries. 10. Anderson Hill, when evidence is thin and legends take over. Anderson Hill is not marked by grand monuments or formally protected ruins. What draws attention here are remnant stone walls, low, irregular alignments that appear old, deliberate, and difficult to date. They do not match the construction patterns of historic farm walls, yet they also lack the defining features of known prehistoric fortifications. The stones are stacked without mortar. Their placement follows the natural contours of the land rather than imposing straight engineered lines. In some sections, the walls seem to guide movement along slopes or ridges. In others, they simply stop, broken, scattered, or partially reclaimed by soil and vegetation. From an archaeological standpoint, this is a problem. There are no secure dates, no associated artifacts that clearly anchor the walls to a specific culture, no written records describing their construction or use. This absence creates a vacuum, and vacuums invite stories. Over time, Anderson Hill became associated with legends of people who came before, outsiders, lost groups, or travelers whose presence was never formally recorded. These stories vary, contradict one another, and lack material support, but they persist because the walls themselves resist easy explanation. This site illustrates an important dynamic in historical interpretation. When physical evidence is incomplete, imagination often steps in to fill the gap. That does not mean the walls are meaningless, it means their meaning is vulnerable. Archaeology tends to be cautious here. The walls could represent boundary markers, temporary enclosures, or structures whose original function no longer translates clearly to modern categories. They may belong to a known indigenous tradition that simply left too little context behind to identify with confidence. What matters is not which theory is most dramatic, but why the uncertainty exists at all. Anderson Hill reminds us that not every mystery survives because it is complex. Some survive because time erased the supporting details faster than it erased the stones. Without dates, without tools, without cultural continuity, even simple structures become opaque. This final site does not end the story with revelation. It ends it with restraint. When evidence grows thin, the responsible response is not certainty, but humility. The walls at Anderson Hill still stand, not as proof of a lost civilization, but as proof of how easily the past can slip beyond reach. And with that, the pattern across Kentucky becomes clear. The land is not silent, but it does not explain itself. When the evidence remains, but the answers do not. Across Kentucky, these 10 sites share a common trait. They are not myths. They are not rumors. They are real places, shaped by human hands, altered with intention, and preserved just enough to be studied, but never enough to be fully understood. Dry stone walls that do not defend, carvings that survive without a language, cities of earth abandoned without violence, marks left deep underground where no one was meant to wander casually, bones from creatures no living memory could recognize, burials that hint at social order long before history says it should exist, circles drawn into soil, still visible yet culturally silent, walls that remain standing while their context disappears. Individually, none of these discoveries overturn archaeology. They do not prove lost super-civilizations, impossible technologies, or forgotten global empires. That is not their significance. Their power lies elsewhere. Together, they reveal a consistent pattern. History is not a complete record. It is a reconstruction built from what survived erosion, collapse, early excavation, and chance. Meaning fades faster than stone. Context disappears faster than structure. And once context is gone, certainty becomes unreachable. In many cases, science offers reasonable explanations. Environmental change, cultural shifts, practical use mistaken for symbolism, or symbolism mistaken for utility. In other cases, the evidence is simply too thin. Dates overlap. Artifacts are missing. Sites were damaged before modern methods existed. This does not weaken archaeology, it defines its limits. The danger is not in admitting uncertainty. The danger is in forcing conclusions where evidence no longer supports them. These Kentucky mysteries do not demand belief. They demand intellectual humility. They remind us that ancient people were not primitive placeholders waiting for progress. They were observant, organized, symbolic, and capable of shaping landscapes in ways that still affect how we move through them today. And yet, their intentions were carried by memory, not by writing. When memory broke, meaning followed. Perhaps that is the final lesson these sites offer. If knowledge is not preserved, it does not slowly fade, it fractures. If context is not protected, evidence becomes mute. And if we fail to pass understanding forward, the future may look back at us the same way we now look at these stones, symbols, and earthworks. Seeing intention, sensing purpose, and still asking why. History is not wrong, it is unfinished.